Well, I'm Robert George Monie, M-O-N-I-E. It's a French name, usually mispronounced Monie. And I worked in several capacities at Delgado. My main one was as enrollment services advisor. I had that job for about 15 years. Before that, I came on originally on a contract to do a survey of Delgado's record keeping. And so that got me to see all branches of Delgado. I went to the West Bank and all around and met everybody because I had to find out who was keeping records in each individual office. And then for a while, I was a note taker for the deaf department here. So I'd go to classes and take notes for the deaf students. And I've worked in Delgado in several capacities. My father worked for Delgado during the war years, World War II, and he taught Army Air Corpsmen how to repair planes. And then my sister worked here for well over 25 years in the business studies department. During the 70s, I was a student, and I came here after I'd worked for a while as a professional musician, and I wanted to change. And I found that Delgado was really great for helping people change. And, of course, it looked like a good place to work, too. So in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, hey, one day I'd like to get on here. My family had always talked about what a good place it was, how they cared about you, how they were reasonable and accepting, and they trained you, and it was like a family. And I found out all those things to be true. The faculty's been extraordinary, and I think most people haven't really looked into it. When I came here in the 60s, of course, I came from a music background. Actually, it was the early 70s. And I was naturally going to pay some attention to the music department, even though I wasn't majoring in music here. And I remember the head of the music department was from Yale University. He has a master's degree from there. He also played French horn in the symphony and the Louisiana Summer Pops. His name was Claus Sadlier. And we got to talking, and I even took a class or two from him in music appreciation and theory and so on. And it turned out he had studied with the German composer Paul Hindemith at Yale, very famous 20th century composer. So imagine that. You can come to Delgado and study with somebody who studied at Yale with Paul Hindemith. But that's only one example. Practically the whole music school faculty at one time or another from Loyola had part-time jobs here. James Bastian, for example, a famous piano teacher, taught here. And Mike Karuba, who was the dean of Loyola's music school, was on the faculty here teaching saxophone and clarinet. If you look at those old catalogs, you see some pretty amazing names. I also remember a civil engineer. His name was Larry Charbonnet. And Larry was a pioneer. He taught a course in solar energy here at Delgado in 1974. Well, of course, when we acquired the Charity School of Nursing, so we could actually give a degree in that. They were an excellent school, but they were not able to grant degrees. That's a major benchmark. And to study to be a nurse has become, Delgado's just become a major place to come. It's a quick program. It's very sound. And I'm told by the directors and other people in the program that the graduates are ready to go right on the wards and work so that the knowledge is not just theoretical. And then we've got a great architecture program. We've got people all over town who are working in architectural firms as draftspeople or subcontractors or designers, and some of them are designing kitchens, some are designing bathrooms, some of them work for Lowe's, Home Depot, all over who've been trained since Victor Mirzak came here to start his architecture program. Since I've been here in Pay, I met Jerry Sisk, who came from LSU. When Jerry retired as an urban farmer, and he came to New Orleans, and he was interested in especially teaching people to grow things in the city, not your typical farm with chickens and cows out in the country. And so he actually built the horticulture program almost from scratch. And he got the greenhouse that's just a few yards outside this building for Delgado. He bought it from a nursery going out of business in Slidell. And he was full of passion and interest in the subject. A lot of us remember him because when we were going to entertain, for example, school counselors, he would make sure every school counselor left here with a plant. So that got to be the talk of the town. Well, come to Delgado because if you go to their school teachers' meeting, their counselors' meeting, that you're going to leave there with one or more plants. And unfortunately, he died after Katrina. He lost a little farm he had in Pointe à la Hache, but he was a great pioneer in building the program. in landscaping and in horticulture. I'm also thinking of a physics teacher by the name of Milos Jovanovic, and he was a teacher here in the 70s, and he had been a war hero in World War II. He won 5 battle stars, and he came here. When he first came to Delgado, he hardly spoke English, so we taught him how to speak English in the equivalent of our ESL program back then. He got much better at it, and then he went to 3 other schools, including Loyola and University of Southeastern Louisiana in Hammond, and earned degrees there. And then he finally loved Delgado so much that he came back and taught physics here. So this is just a few examples of the quality of instruction that we've had here. It may be interesting to note that the trumpet instructor here during the 60s and 70s was George Jansen. And Jansen taught Terrence Blanchard, who's a well-known trumpeter today in New Orleans, and he also gave lessons, private lessons, to Wynton Marsalis. In fact, Wynton was still taking lessons from George even when he was going to NOCA. That's how much he thought of him as a teacher. We had really great leadership during that period. Fortunately, we had a lot of people who were advising the president, as well as the president, who were very level-headed, who had years of experience at this school, and who knew what to do to keep the faculty employed and the staff employed. And all of us were so grateful to receive our paychecks during the couple of weeks when we were not able physically to be here and the school couldn't be reopened. And we were delighted when Dr. Alec Johnson made the decision to move us over to the West Bank and run the school from there. And they also were able to keep online classes going. And I think that's when the online program at Delgado really took off. People living in Houston or living in Memphis or in Dallas could see that they could continue their education at Delgado by signing up for online courses. And I guess we must have tripled or quadrupled online enrollment during that period. But just looking at other schools in town, I'd have to say nobody did as good a job, in my opinion, keeping their facilities going, their school going, and keeping it intact. They didn't fire a lot of people here. Just about everybody who was a decent worker who wanted to come back kept their job. And there was no reason to regret that. They were able to keep the payroll going. They were able to start up that January with a full faculty, a full staff, to handle students. And that's when the curve really started shooting up again. Of course, we dipped after Katrina, but it shot up to record-breaking proportions to where we are now, over 19,000 students enrolled. But it's a great, I think, irreplaceable resource to the city of New Orleans. And we do have to remember that Mr. Delgado's intention was to give a gift to the city of New Orleans. And I think Delgado has never stopped being that, a gift. And it's kind of like an investment that he would appreciate. He was a man who understood business, he understood profit making, he understood how to stay in the black, not in the red. And I think he would have understood that the investment he made in Delgado has reaped a lot of profits. These are social profits, economic profits, profits for everybody that's part of the city of New Orleans and that can afford to come here.